fantastic. Welcome, everybody, to the Board of Education meeting. Slight change in schedule here. We're going to do an open finance meeting, and then at 7:30, we'll start with the regular public Board of Ed meeting. So just to take care of the housekeeping up front, I'm going to read the open public meeting statement. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the school district of the Chatham Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted at the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, the Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and TAP. Do we want to do a roll call or wait for the full board? Because Rich and Mike are still coming. Okay, so we'll hold off on that. And then we'll hold off on the Pledge of Allegiance as well. Okay, so we're going to go into the open finance meeting. What's that? Did you want to do it?
I know I don't want to do it.
We could do that in a minute. So Mike, I'm going to pass it to you if you wouldn't mind running us through the budget as it stands right now. When last we met, we were over 3% increase, and the directive was to see where we can make some cuts to try and get that under 3%.
Sure.
And then also a list of what we're cutting and what we're not adding as well, as requested by some of our staff.
Perfect. So yes, so this is the second pass of the 2017-2018 budget, and since we last met, we had a regular board meeting where the directive from the board was to try to trim a little bit from the budget, and then we had a couple of committee meetings in the interim, and so here we are, and this is where we stand right now. So I'll just move quickly through any of the slides that are repetitive, but there are three main influences on this budget that are causing the type of increase that we're looking at: state aid, enrollment, and health insurance costs. And I didn't elaborate on state aid last time, so I'm just going to take 1 minute to give a primer on that. But we receive various forms of aid from the state. The biggest amount that we get, and that all school districts get typically, is called direct state aid. And that's categorical aid, meaning that it comes out of categories related to either special education, transportation, security, and so forth. Direct state aid is supposed to be allocated according to SIFRA. That's the School Funding Reform Act of 2008. And SIFRA, I won't get into a lengthy explanation of SIFRA, but SIFRA altered the way the state was distributing money back in 2008, and it put a bigger emphasis on current demographics of a school district and student enrollment. And by demographics, what I mean principally is that SIFRA takes into account the grade configuration of a school district. So an elementary-only school district is weighted a little bit differently than a K through 12 district where you've got high school grades. And then it also takes into account, of course, the number of economically disadvantaged students and the number of students who are learning English as a second language, and then the number of students who are classified as special education, so on and so forth. So it's based on the demographic in the demographics of the enrollment, and then the actual sort of census of the district, meaning that when enrollments fluctuate either up or down, that should be reflected in SIFRA. And the mantra when SIFRA was introduced and ultimately passed was that aid would follow students. So if students moved from district to district, or one particular school district became less affluent over time, that would be reflected in SIFRA, and the state aid numbers would fluctuate according to how the district was changing. SIFRA hasn't been run or applied since 2009-2010, which was the apex of the economic crisis.
And was it applied in 2007?
2000, it's only been run one time. That was 2009-10, because it was developed in 2008. So there was a different funding formula before SIFRA.
So it was run once, but then we lost a considerable amount of state aid.
Yes.
Right at this juncture.
Correct. So I'll kind of go into that. So one of the issues right now, or one of the frustrations for a district like us, is that because SIFRA hasn't been run since 2009, 2010, districts that have seen changes in their enrollment that normally would result in increased funding have not been privy to that funding, or have not enjoyed that funding increase. Whereas conversely, districts that have had significant losses in enrollment have actually benefited in some ways, in some cases, from SIFRA not having been run. Because the state aid amounts basically are the result of what enrollments looked like 2009, 2010, as opposed to 2016, 15, 16, or 16, 17. So to look at it another way, just like you said, Jill, SIFRA, this was the year that SIFRA was run. And then the following year was the financial crisis, and Chatham lost 87% of its direct aid that year. In the ensuing years, as the economy recovered and the state got back on its feet, all districts saw increases in funding from that real terrible and difficult year. And then you can see that for about the last 6 years or so, we're pretty much flat. Another way to look at it is just aid per pupil. So when we talk about how much a per pupil budgetary cost of, let's say, $13,400 or so, about what it is for Chatham, this is just the amount of aid per pupil. So at our height, we were getting close to $800 per pupil, and then that has tapered down. And looking at just districts, you can look at any district in New Jersey and see what has happened to their direct state aid. I don't want to get into this complicated explanation, but when state aid was slashed in the 2010-11 school year, it wasn't slashed equally in every single school district. So some school districts going into the 10-11 school year may have lost only 10% of their state aid. We lost 87%. Other districts may have lost 50% of their state aid. There was not a relationship between the amount of lost aid and the formula. So the relationship to the formula was lost with the financial crisis. And you can see now 2017, 2018 versus 2009-10. These are just the K through 12 school districts in Morris County. Not all the school districts in Morris County, just the ones that are K-12. Since 2009-10 into this current year of funding, the amounts, the difference on a percentage basis that the districts are receiving in state aid is different. It varies across the district. You can see that we're sort of at the bottom, and we have about 33% less direct aid than we did in 2009-10, whereas other districts might only be down 5% or 10%. So the reason why that matters so much for us, unlike for some other districts, is that our enrollment has increased during that time. So some of the other districts have not had a dramatic enrollment increase. In fact, none of them have had the increase that we've had. So if they've only lost 10% or even 20% of their aid, it hasn't necessarily been as difficult for them to absorb as it has been for us because of the fact that we're gaining students. So I showed this one last time. This is just sort of, the two ingredients of state aid versus enrollment increases. These are all those same K through 12 school districts in Morris County, and the percentage increase on enrollment that they've had from 2005-06, so basically the 10 years that are most recently available, to 2015-16.
So just real quick, Mike, if I can ask a question. The districts that saw a significant decrease in enrollment, they kept the exact same state aid?
Their aid was still cut. We all lost aid.
I understood.
But
that.
yes, their aid was based on their enrollment in
So they
9-10,
so they got
not
more-
in 15-16.
So they kept most of their funding, but had less students to pay for.
Yeah,
We
so if
lost
you-
our funding and had 50% more students to pay for.
Right. So you can see Madison and Chatham here lost a lot of funding, and Madison and Chatham here are the two districts with the most enrollment growth. Whereas if you took another district like Roxbury lost 6% of direct aid, and yet Roxbury is the very bottom here in terms of how much it lost. So there's no relationship between where enrollments stand now and what has happened with state aid.
But would you say that the relationship could be because of the students perhaps in other districts that are a higher percentage receiving free lunch, a higher percentage at a certain where we may not be meeting that criteria in the eyes of the state to, or is it just unknown?
Nobody really knows.
Okay.
No one that I know or who I've heard speak really knows what the rhyme or reason is to the state aid amounts right now.
Who's our political representation
So who do you ask?
in Chatham responsible for being the squeaky wheel?
Well,
So that we're not in that position. Who's our representation?
Well, there are 3 different representatives from Borough Township, but they're not the ones who come up with the formula. I mean, the legislature at the time in 2008 passed the current formula as it stands now, but that formula hasn't been run because it's part of the governor's budget. So they don't, what's happening now, if you watched Governor Christie's address a few weeks ago, was that he sort of challenged the legislature to come up with a new formula. The legislature has mixed sentiments on the current formula. I think, many folks in the legislature believe the formula is not the problem, it's that there has to be a more fair and equitable way to fund the formula. And that's a debate that's sort of happening in Trenton right now. Also I took, going beyond the county, these are all, when we used to be classified by DFG, that's the socioeconomic groupings that the state used to use. They haven't used DFGs in a while, but 5-10 years ago they were using DFGs. Chatham is a J district. J is the most affluent classification. The poorest classification is an A district. So there are 9 total K through 12 J districts in the state. And it's a little bit hard to read, but they're Haddonfield, Milburn, Bernards Township, West Windsor, Plainsboro, Ridgewood, Glen Rock, Montgomery, and Mountain Lakes. And it's a similar kind of pattern. Some have gone up, some have gone down. For whatever reason, Chatham has gone up the most in the past decade. And then this is just an interesting chart that we talk about every now and again, but going back to 1990, which essentially was the first or second year of the existence of the school district of the Chathams. If you looked at our enrollment of 2169, these are the actual numbers, where we stood. This was 2001 was 2,955 kids, 2009-10, 3,988, and then where we were in 2015-16. Now we're actually at 4,234 kids. So we've gained, another 2% or whatever it is over 4154. But the borough and the township, their populations, according to the U.S. Census, have not increased that much. So whereas the district has seen these dramatic gains, astoundingly, I guess the borough and the township don't have, it's not reflected in the overall populations of the town. So that's enrollment. So we've got state aid and we've got enrollment.
So
And
in
then
10 years on your chart, we've gone up 50% essentially. In the last 10 to 15 years, our enrollment has gone up 50%, some like the 40 to the 90.
where is that? Well,
Just-
this was 25%, right, since 2001. Because that was close to 3,000, and then we're at 4,200, so maybe a little bit more than 28% or something in the 15 years. So those were the first 2 ingredients. State aid, which is kind of a challenge right now, and then enrollment, which also has created challenges for us just in terms of our ability to manage the number of students we have. And then the third element that's impacting us this year is the health insurance increase, and where we are is 14.5%. So because of that increase, we qualify for a waiver because the state employees health benefits plan is also increasing at a rate greater than 2%. So the state essentially tells us that we qualify for a waiver to the 2% tax levy in the amount of $444,000. We have some bank cap from last year, and bank cap is just money that we could have incorporated into a tax levy increase that we did not last year. So we have that available, and then there's, of course, just the 2%. And if you add all that together, the board could entertain a 3.20% tax levy increase. So where we were, last meeting was, you know, the directive, we were at 3.09, the directive was to move the needle down and get it below 3%. This is the same slide as I think was in the presentation last time, same with this. This is just per pupil spending of the K through 12 districts in Morris County. This too is just a representation of Chatham's per pupil spending over time versus the state. State is red, Chatham's blue. Again, this was included in the last presentation. I won't dwell on it. This is just the school tax levy. So this is the property tax. The amount of property taxes that these municipalities collect that are then devoted to the school district. So it's the school tax levy, and Chatham, of course, combines the borough and the township. But you can see on all these measures that Chatham is not excessive in spending in relation to other districts like us. So since the last budget, we made a number of decisions. So one is that our enrollment continues to be low in first grade and kindergarten. We think we can assume that we will lose at least one teacher at the K-3 level. We're going to pick up a teacher at Southern, but we think we'll lose one at Washington and one at Milton Avenue, just in terms of the enrollment, the incoming enrollment in first grade. And then the current first grade moving into second grade at Milton. So we're going to budget for a decline of $80,000 there. We are going to trim back the paraprofessional support that we have right now and that we've had, you know, for a long time in our K-3 library and media centers. We are fortunate to receive a lot of support from our parent populations in those schools, and we think that we can manage and get by with just a librarian and some extra support from parents where necessary. And then a number of our principals had requested additional security cameras just in places where maybe we don't have cameras right now and there are, you know, dark spots in and around the buildings. So we took that out of the budget. So taking those items out of the budget, and this slide also was included in the last presentation, brings us to, it's hard to see, I apologize, a levy increase of 2.87%. And this slide is also the same as last time, except it reflects the loss of these three items from the budget, or the removal of these three items from the budget.
And it's your, I assume you wouldn't have put it up there if you didn't think that we could absorb that loss without any significant impact to students.
Correct. The other slides, like this one with the estimated impact on the annual tax bill, also are just updated to reflect the 2.87 versus the 3.09. So 3.09 was where we were, 2.87 is where we are right now. That's the same. And then, so the items that have not been included, that have been requested by principals, most of this really relates to the high school and the enrollment growth that we are experiencing there. Our largest class in the district right now is at the middle school in 8th grade. We have about 379 students or so. So those students are moving up into the high school. We have about 325 students from memory or so in 12th grade right now. So we'll gain about 50 students at the high school, and the principal there has sought staff to try to keep the class sizes the same level that they are now. If we are unable to fund these positions, we're hoping to be able to fund one or two of them once we get a full handle on the number of retirements we have and whether or not we have some more enrollment loss at the K-3 level. So if we're able to fund one or two of these positions, we will moving forward, but as the budget stands right now, these would not be included, so the class sizes would float up a little higher at the high school.
And are those in order? Let's say one teacher frees up, because adding 50 students, now you're talking about a degradation in, there's no possible way a teacher can offer the same experience with 22 kids in a class versus 30 kids in a class. There's assignments that they won't be able to give. There's certain assessments. I mean, you can't possibly grade that many There's only 24 hours in a day, they can't do it. Speaking from painful experience, I just,
Well, we would try to be methodical in where the larger classes are. This is not, I apologize, this is not in perfect priority order. I think
Okay.
science right now might be at the top of the front of the line.
Okay.
But I would reprioritize once we have schedules completed. So our incoming freshmen, I think will be completed either at the end of this week or next week. So we're close to, and they're the last of the lot that have to get scheduled. So once all of their requests are in and we have a good command of the distributions of students and courses, then we can make more methodical decisions about which department areas and which courses will end up bumping up and letting the sizes go up a little.
But kids will not get, kids will have access to the classes they need. They're not going to get closed out, numbers. I know we haven't had to do that, but.
I don't anticipate that right now, but that's the other way to go is to, if you have a class of 12 students, let's just say, I'm just speaking off the top of my head, in an elective that we could run if we had, a staff member available, we could make the decision to not run that class and then have those kids sign up for their second or third selection and then use the staff more efficiently.
My bigger concern would be classes that were oversubscribed. And so let's say you've got 32 kids that want access to a certain class, and then it just gets too unmanageable.
So usually what we do in those situations when we have them is we would prioritize seniors and juniors first, and we might, if we have a class that is oversubscribed, and we might say, well, we're not going to allow any freshmen to take this class, or we'll leave it because they have 3 more years where they can, if they want, take the class, they just can't get it now. And then we've had, requests for 2 extracurricular programs. The one, sailing, has been up and running for 3 years now. They're seeking funding from the district, and that is not in the proposed budget at the present time. And then paddle, of course, those folks have been to a recent board meeting, and they have a vibrant, activity taking place right now, and they would like inclusion in the program. We haven't allocated funding for either of those programs in this budget yet. The only item of note that's included is an additional counselor at CHS, and that's for the aforementioned reason that with 50 more kids coming in, we want to make sure that the students get all the attention that they deserve when it comes to their scheduling, their wellness, their college admissions and applications processes, so on and so forth. And that was prioritized as the greatest need from the high school. So this is our second open finance committee meeting, and then the budget needs to be adopted at the May 1st board meeting, where we'll have the official public hearing.
Does anybody else have any additional questions? I know we kind of cut in. Sal, did you have, you seemed like you were anxious to jump in there.
No, those two club sports that have been lobbying for funding, which we'd like to give, how much is the funding required for each of those?
I don't have that right at my fingertips.
Okay.
I think roughly they're about 5,000 each.
Yeah, I mean, I think-
Roughly, between 5,000 and 6,000.
Yeah.
But we could always play with it. We'll pay for so much transportation, or, I think the full budget was, between $5,000 and $6,000.
Especially with the new ones, we can give them some money and then they can request
Mhm.
additional money from.
That's
the
true,
district
too.
Or whatever.
Right now, we have no money.
Right.
Right now, we have no
But
money.
my point being,
Yes.
that's how it generally would work. It's not always a set amount.
And then the other comment, and I'm kind of channeling Matt, who's not here tonight, who's on the road, but, we're trying to figure out how to skimp and save and scratch and claw for this budget. But if we see health insurance do the same thing next year or the year after, it's going to look a bit starker for the school district. And I think the public should be aware of that.
Oh, it's going to get frightening if it continues. And we're capped at 14.5. It could, likely with our usage, it will continue to rise. The 14.5 was contractually,
Yes, we had
Okay.
signed on to a 2-year,
And next
A
year it's
two-year
up, and they go by
guarantee.
experience rating.
so next year we'll be in the business of, they'll examine our experience rating. We'll hope that our experience rating is good and better than it has been the last 2 years. 3 years ago, it was excellent, and we had a very low, minimal health insurance increase. So it kind of ebbs and flows. The last 2 years have been very difficult, and a year from now, we'll be looking at that again, and then we have to make the decision if to either stay with our current provider or go out and try to
Go to the state system.
shop. Well, moving to the state system would require negotiations with the bargaining units.
Yeah, and that's fine, but the frank conversation is then we either get down to the bargaining table or we have to start cutting headcount, because there's no way to come up with that kind of cash without cutting headcount. So it's not an emotional conversation, it's a dollars and cents conversation. And to continue channeling Matt, who's not here, we're working with a fixed income of 2% with a variable expense budget. So this is a, round peg, square hole to work with a fixed 2% increase, yet we're looking at a 14.5% increase in just one of our larger line items, health insurance. So, we've already started to cut where we can, and I think this was a solid effort, and I appreciate you getting under 3. But looking out a year, 5 years, on this trend, it's going to be a very different experience for the students. I'm sorry, Sal, did you have anything else?
No?
No? Mike? No. You good? Ann?
No, I'm good.
Teacher in the room? Are you frightened?
I'm scared.
She's scared.
I'm not scared. I'm just busy, year by year.
I don't have any additional questions. We have a couple minutes before the
Yep, we'll
regular board. You want to
set up and break down.
Tom,
Yep.
just give us a couple minutes so we can break down the PowerPoint.